Hey besties, welcome back to Maggie Stories. You spent 6 weeks secretly talking to another woman behind your girlfriend's back, then you show up to meet her carrying 40 white roses, only to find her sitting at the table waiting for you.
The bouquet was enormous. 40 white roses, wrapped in black satin ribbon, held by two hands that belonged to a man who had no idea his entire life was about to become a punchline. Etta Brown watched him walk through the hotel lobby from behind the menu she was pretending to read. She had arrived 40 minutes early, chosen the corner table with the best view of the entrance, ordered a sparkling water, a fruit plate, and a plate of jollof rice the hotel restaurant had no business making, but she'd ordered anyway just to see. She was wearing something she loved, the kind of outfit that made women look twice and men forget their names, and she had her phone face down on the table and her ankles crossed, and she had not blinked in approximately 4 seconds because Seo Jinwoo had just walked through those doors carrying roses for a woman who did not exist. He looked good. That was the worst part. That had always been the worst part about Jinwoo. He was devastatingly put together. The kind of handsome that cost money to maintain. Dark hair swept back, jaw like a man who had never once doubted himself, shoulders like a decision. He was scanning the lobby with that slow, private smile she used to think was just for her. She used to think a lot of things. Etta picked up her fork. He spotted table 12, her table, and started walking. She watched the exact moment he saw her face. It happened in stages. First his legs stopped. Then his eyes did something complicated. Then the roses, 40, dropped exactly 3 inches because his hands forgot to hold on. Etta Brown put a piece of mango in her mouth, chewed slowly, and said, "You're late. Let's go back. Because you need to understand how a woman like Etta gets to a moment like this. You need to understand what kind of woman orders jollof rice at a 5-star hotel in Seoul just to have something to do with her hands while her boyfriend walks in with flowers for someone else. You need to understand what kind of woman orders jollof rice at a 5-star hotel in Seoul just to have something to do with her hands while her boyfriend walks in with flowers for someone else. You need to understand what it cost her to get here and why she was laughing." Etta Brown was 29 years old, born in Kingston, raised between her grandmother's house and the kind of ambition that doesn't ask permission. She had come to Seoul 4 years ago with a business degree, a carry-on suitcase, a folder full of certifications, and absolutely no plan to fall in love with anyone. She had fallen in love with the city instead. The noise of it, the precision, the way it moved like it had somewhere to be. She had climbed inside one of Seoul's mid-sized trading firms as a junior associate and worked until they made her a manager, which they did 18 months later, which was faster than anyone before her. She managed a team of 11 people, ran 2 client portfolios, and had a standing coffee order that everyone in the office memorized because she only had to say it once. She was also, incidentally, the funniest person in any room she entered. This was not a quality she advertised. It was just something that happened. She had a gift for timing. The long pause before the punchline, the completely straight face, the way she could say the most devastating thing in the world and make it sound like a question. Her team adored her. Her friends called her at midnight when they needed to be talked off a ledge. Strangers at coffee shops ended up telling her things they'd never told their therapists. She was also beautiful in the specific way of women who have never needed to be told so. Not because she didn't hear it, she heard it constantly, but because it was simply never the most interesting thing about her. She moved through the world like she owned a small portion of it, and the portion she owned was wherever she was standing. This was the woman Seo Jinwoo had somehow convinced himself he could manage. They had met through mutual friends at a rooftop dinner that went too long into the night. He had been the quietest person at the table, which was unusual for someone worth what he was worth. The Seo family name sat in certain circles of Seoul like a stone in water. You felt the ripples before you saw where they came from. Old money, old alliances, the kind of empire that had its own lawyers, its own security, its own mythology. Jinwoo was the second son, which meant he was simultaneously free and watched, powerful, and still proving something. He had not tried to impress Etta that night. That was also unusual. He had just talked to her. About music first, then about a book they'd both read, then about a trip to Japan he'd taken alone that had gone badly in interesting ways. He was funny, too. Drier than she expected, the kind of funny that surprised you. She had laughed genuinely, which she did not do to be polite. They had exchanged numbers as friends. That was true. That part was completely true. For 3 months they were just that. Friends. He took her to places that weren't date-shaped, a friend's gallery opening, a late-night ramen spot that had no business being as good as it was, a company dinner where he introduced her to 3 people who would later become useful professional contacts. She cooked for him once, a full Jamaican Sunday situation that made him quiet in the way food sometimes makes people quiet when it tastes like something they didn't know they were missing. He sat in her kitchen afterward and didn't leave until past 1 in the morning, and neither of them mentioned it. She fell first, probably. She would admit that now. She fell in that slow, unglamorous way that happens when you stop noticing someone is there and start noticing when they aren't. She fell in the middle of a conversation. She fell on a Tuesday. He told her 3 weeks later. They were walking back from a late dinner. And he just said it. She remembered stopping walking, he remembered stopping too. They were under a streetlight on a street whose name she'd later look up and never be able to find. And then they were together. That was it. It was simple. Felt like something that had already happened. The first 4 months were the version of Jinwoo she would keep in a private drawer of her memory for the rest of her life. Not because she was still in love with him, but because he had been genuinely good then, or something close to good, and she believed in accuracy. He showed up. He called when he said he would call. He remembered things, small things, the kind that mean you were actually listening. He met her friends and was charming in a way that didn't feel performed. He flew her to Jeju for her birthday and spent 3 days pretending to be a person with no responsibilities. He held her hand in public first, before she did. He made her feel, for the first time in a long time, like being someone's was not the same thing as making yourself smaller. Then month 5 started. And something shifted. It was not a dramatic shift. That was the thing that made it hard to name at first. If he had done something enormous, she would have known what to do. Etta Brown was not a woman who had trouble naming things. But this was not enormous. This was the slow withdrawal of small things. A text that took 6 hours instead of 1. A dinner that got canceled and rescheduled and then quietly dropped. A mood that arrived without explanation and left the same way. He was busy, he said. The family business, he said. Things she half understood and he only half explained. She asked once directly because she did not do the other kind of asking. Are we okay? He said yes. He said it too quickly, which she noted. Then the comments started. She had a public profile, not because she sought it, but because dating Jinwoo had made her one. The pictures existed. The dinners had been documented. The internet had opinions. Some of those opinions came from Korean women whose accounts were pristine, whose comment sections were suspiciously clean, who tagged Jinwoo in photos that Etta had no context for and who wrote, sometimes in Korean that Etta's translation app caught perfectly, things that were designed to land. She's just using him. He's been tired of her for weeks, I heard. She should go back to where she came from. Why is she even here? Uni told me he was at dinner with someone else last Thursday. Etta read all of it. She read it the way she read quarterly reports. Thoroughly, without emotional reaction. Looking for patterns. And the pattern was this. These were not random trolls. There was too much specific information. There was too much consistency. One account mentioned a hotel by name. Another mentioned a gift, a bracelet, a specific one, that Jinwoo had supposedly given someone as recently as 3 weeks ago. She brought it to him. He did what men who are guilty and not ready to be caught always do. He was calm. He was reasonable. He used the word clout twice and trolls 3 times, and he made her feel, briefly and precisely, like she was the problem for bringing it up. He had standards, he said. He didn't engage with media nonsense. This was beneath them both, he said. Etta listened. She said nothing that revealed what she was thinking. She said, okay. And she meant something entirely different by it. She said okay like a woman who had just made a decision. That night she made a new Instagram account. She spent 3 hours on it. This was not a rushed operation. The account needed to be believable in the way that a thing is believable when it knows exactly what it is doing. She sourced photos carefully. A woman whose face and life were aesthetically coherent, whose page told a story, whose style communicated a very specific thing. High access, low availability. She filled the page back several months. She followed the right accounts. She let it sit for 2 days to age. Then she sent Jinwoo a DM. She did it from her real phone, a separate number, with her feet up on her couch and a cup of tea going cold on the table. She said something simple first. Complimented something he'd posted. Left space. He replied in 47 minutes. She knew it was him immediately. The cadence was his, the humor was his, the specific way he warmed up slowly before he started showing off. She let him lead. She matched his energy and exceeded it slightly, which is how you make someone feel they've discovered something. She was not flirtatious first. She was interesting first. Because she knew him. She knew that bored him into someone else's arms was never the right direction. He needed to feel like he'd found something worth pursuing. Within 3 days he was pursuing. Within a week, he was calling the number connected to the new account on a burner she'd purchased specifically for this. The calls confirmed everything the comments had suggested and more. He was lonely, he said. Things weren't perfect at home, he said, home meaning Etta. Etta being the home he was now describing to her face through a voice she was disguising with terrible signal and a lot of background coffee shop noise. He wasn't happy, he said. He was looking for something real. Etta took notes. Not literally, but she took notes. Then she said she thought they should meet. And he said yes so fast she had to put the phone down for a moment to compose her face. She chose the hotel. She chose the table. She chose the time, the day, the arrangement of everything. She got there 40 minutes early, ordered the sparkling water, ordered the fruit, ordered the jollof rice she knew the kitchen had no business making, and she sat in the corner with the best sightline and she waited. He came through the doors carrying 40 white roses. He walked to her table. He saw her face. The roses dropped 3 inches. Etta Brown put a piece of mango in her mouth, chewed slowly and said, "You're late." And then she started to laugh. Not a little laugh. Not a polite, controlled, I have one laugh. A real one. A full, helpless, from the stomach laugh that turned heads at 2 other tables and made the waiter near the window pause with a water pitcher in his hand. She laughed the way you laugh when something is genuinely, structurally, cosmically funny. She laughed the way her grandmother laughed. She laughed like she had been waiting her whole life to be in exactly this room, at exactly this table, watching exactly this man stand there holding roses for a woman who was her. Seo Jinwoo did not move. He stood there, 40 roses in his hands and absolutely nothing in his playbook. And he looked at the woman he had underestimated so completely and so precisely that there was genuinely nothing left to do. Etta picked up her fork, gestured loosely at the chair across from her, and said, still laughing, "Sit down, Jinwoo. The food's getting cold." He did not sit down. He was still standing. This was the thing Etta could not get over. She had now been laughing for approximately 90 seconds. Real, uncontrolled, helpless laughter. And Seo Jinwoo was still standing in the middle of the restaurant holding 40 white roses like a man who had arrived at the wrong funeral and hadn't figured out how to leave yet. The waiter near the window had completely abandoned pretending to work. He was just watching. The couple at the table to Etta's left had gone very quiet in the specific way of people who have decided that whatever is happening nearby is more interesting than their own dinner. An older woman near the window had her reading glasses pushed down her nose and was looking over them with the expression of someone who had lived long enough to recognize a moment. Jinwoo's jaw was doing something complicated. Etta wiped the corner of her eye with one finger, took a breath, composed herself approximately 40%, and looked at him. "The flowers are beautiful," she said. "Who are they for?" His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Because if they're for me," she continued, picking up her glass of sparkling water. "That's very sweet, and also very confusing, since according to you," she tilted her head, "you've been single for the last 3 weeks. The older woman by the window made a sound. It might have been a cough. It was not a cough. Jinwoo finally moved. He took 2 steps toward the table, stopped, seemed to recalculate, and said the first words he had managed since arriving. "Etta. How did you?" "Sit down, Jinwoo." "Etta. Sit. Down." He sat down. Not gracefully. He sort of arrived in the chair the way a building collapses, all at once, with no dignity and a lot of weight. The roses ended up on the table between them. 40 white blooms fanned out like evidence at a hearing, which was essentially what this was. Etta looked at them, then looked at him. "Those are actually gorgeous," she said. "Good choice." She would have loved them. "There is no Jinwoo." Her voice was pleasant. Completely pleasant. That was somehow the most alarming thing in the room. "We both know how this conversation ends. So let's skip the part where you try to explain and go straight to the part where I eat my food. I'm hungry." She picked up her fork. She ate. He watched her eat with the expression of a man who had entered a room expecting one kind of disaster and found an entirely different one. Worse in ways he didn't have language for yet. The waiter materialized. Etta smiled at him and ordered a second course. Jinwoo stared at the menu without reading it. "Are you eating?" Etta asked. "I know. I don't think I can eat right now." "That's fine." She gestured loosely. "More for me." Here is what Seo Jinwoo was processing, slowly and painfully, while Etta ate her meal with the serenity of a woman on a solo holiday. The account, the photos, the weeks of conversation, the calls. He was going back through all of it in real time, the way you replay something you misheard and suddenly understand differently the second time. He was finding all the moments where he should have known, the specific questions she, Etta, had asked, the things she'd gotten him to confirm, the way she'd let him talk and talk and talk, and had never once pushed in a direction that felt like a trap because she already knew where every door led. She had built a room around him and handed him the key and told him it was his idea to walk in. "How long?" he said finally. Etta looked up. "How long what? How long did you know?" She considered this. The comments started about 6 weeks ago. The ones with actual information, the hotel name, the bracelet. That was week 2. She ate something. The account went up 4 weeks ago. You replied in 47 minutes. She paused. I clocked it. Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly. The calls were the most educational part. She continued in the tone of someone delivering a mildly interesting work presentation. You are very talkative when you think someone new is interested in you. Did you know that? You told her, me, things in 2 weeks that you never told me in 8 months. He said nothing. What was that line again? She looked up at the ceiling, performing memory. Things aren't perfect at home. I liked that one. Home. Like I'm a location. Etta. I'm not angry, by the way. She said it simply, and meant it, which was somehow the most disorienting thing she'd said yet. I was. Past tense. The anger was about 3 weeks ago. Then I got busy. She smiled at him. I got very busy. Let's talk about the billing. Because this is the part of the story that Etta's friends would later lose their minds over when she told it. The part that her cousin back in Kingston would make her repeat 4 times before accepting it was real. The part that would become, in a very specific circle of women who knew Etta Brown, something close to legend. When the fake account had established enough rapport, when Jinwoo was well and truly invested, messaging first, calling unprompted, sending voice notes at 10:30 at night, Etta began the second phase of the operation. She called it, privately, the budget reconciliation. It started reasonably. The fictional woman mentioned, casually, that she was trying to get something shipped from overseas and customs was being complicated. Jinwoo, who was at that point performing the role of generous new connection, offered to help. Etta gave him an account number, a real one belonging to her actual savings, and he sent money without asking for documentation. A significant amount. She noted it and kept going. The next week, the fictional woman had a problem with her apartment. A landlord situation. Again, Jinwoo stepped in. Again, money moved. Etta sent a receipt. She made a whole fake receipt. She had spent an entire Tuesday afternoon on this receipt. She was proud of this receipt. And he didn't even look at it closely. Then there was the matter of what she had started thinking of as the showing-off phase, because once a certain kind of man believes a certain kind of woman might be impressed by his money, he stops waiting to be asked and starts volunteering. He sent things. He proposed things. A weekend trip. A restaurant that required a specific reservation he could get. Each time Etta, as the fictional woman, received the offer, agreed to it, and watched him transfer funds or make bookings that she quietly redirected or, in 2 cases, simply kept. By the time she sent the hotel location for their meeting, the total was enough to make her pause and look at her savings account for a moment with an expression that was partly satisfaction and partly something she didn't have a name for. She told exactly one person during this period. Her best friend Tamara, who lived in London and whose reaction to the full plan, delivered via voice note at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, was a solid 40 seconds of silence followed by, Etta, I'm going to need you to be my lawyer. Back at the table, Jinwoo had done the math. She could see it happening. The specific sequence of realizations crossing his face like weather systems. The transfers, he said. The apartment. Complicated landlord situation. Etta agreed. Very sympathetic of you. Etta, that was yours. She tilted her head. Jinwoo, you gave it to a woman you met online, who you were planning to meet in a hotel, while you were in a relationship. A pause. I'm not sure the legal framing works the way you'd like it to. His mouth closed. Besides, she added, returning to her food, consider it a consulting fee. A consulting. For 6 weeks of my personal time spent managing an entire second persona while also running 2 client portfolios and maintaining, I should note, a completely normal relationship with you during which I cooked for you twice, and attended your cousin's engagement party. She looked at him. I wore heels to that event, Jinwoo. In April. The consulting fee is reasonable. Something was happening to his face that she found genuinely interesting. It was the specific expression of a man who has spent his entire life being the most powerful person in most rooms and has encountered a situation in which that power is not only irrelevant but has been, somehow, used against him. He looked, and she would think about this later, turning it over, he looked young. Not in a sympathetic way. In the way that certain people look young when they've been caught, when the persona drops and what's underneath it hasn't grown all the way yet. She felt something that was almost pity and put it down immediately. You lied to me, she said, not with heat, just with fact. From about month 5 onward you were lying to me consistently, and when I asked directly you made me feel like asking was the problem. And then women who had very specific information about your private schedule were commenting on my public profile, which, she paused, is its own conversation. Jinwoo said nothing. I'm not here to have that conversation today, actually. She set down her fork. I had it, in my head, many times, and I realized at some point that there was nothing you could say that would give me back the 8 months, so, she shrugged. I found a more productive use of the energy. The waiter returned with her second course. She thanked him by name. She had learned his name during the 40 minutes she'd spent waiting. He smiled and refilled her water and gave Jinwoo a look that was extremely difficult to read and left. Jinwoo picked up the roses. He looked at them. He put them down. What are you going to do? He said. It wasn't quite a question. Right now? Eat. She gestured at the table. After that, go home. I have an early meeting. I mean, I know what you mean. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going to post about it if that's what you're asking. I'm not interested in a war. I'm interested in dinner. She ate something. You can figure out your own life. That's not my project anymore. He called his mother at 8:14 p.m. Etta knew this because she was still at the table. She had ordered a dessert. She was not leaving this dessert. She had specifically saved room. When he stepped away from the table with his phone, and she could see him through the restaurant's glass panel standing in the lobby, and she could tell from the way his shoulders changed that the person who answered was not a business contact. She could not hear the conversation. She didn't need to. What she knew about Jinwoo's mother, Madame Seo Yun-hee, was what most people knew. She was 71 years old, had run the Seo family's internal affairs since her husband's death with an efficiency that made her children nervous at dinner, had opinions about most things and shared them without invitation, and loved her son Jinwoo with the specific, exasperated love of a mother who has watched a brilliant person repeatedly make choices that do not reflect their intelligence. She also had met Etta twice and had, on both occasions, been warm in a way that felt neither performed nor diplomatic, just genuinely warm, the kind that comes from recognizing something in someone. Etta found out later, from Tamara, who found out from Etta's friend Jisoo, who had a contact in the Seo-adjacent social world, what Madame Seo had said when her son called. Apparently he told her the situation. All of it. Perhaps hoping she would be shocked on his behalf, or offer the comfort of taking his side, or do the thing that guilty people sometimes hope mothers will do, which is absorb the guilt and give it back as reassurance. Madame Seo had listened to the full account. Then she had said, in the dry, measured tone she reserved for things she found both predictable and disappointing. So she caught you. And then she billed you. And then she invited you to watch her eat dinner. Jinwoo had said yes. Madame Seo had been quiet for a moment. Then she said, Jinwoo, I like her more now than I did before. He apparently started to explain that Etta had created a fake account? Yes, because you gave her a reason to. Did you think a woman like that was just going to cry and leave? More explanation. The money? Jinwoo, you sent money to a stranger online. That is not her fault. That is a Tuesday for you. The fact that the stranger was your girlfriend is, honestly, the funniest thing that has happened in this family since your uncle tried to invest in that resort. He said something about the principle of the thing. His mother said, "The principle is that you had a good woman and you treated her like a placeholder, and she responded with more creativity and self-possession than anyone in your generation has shown me in years. Call me when you have something real to say." She apparently hung up before he could respond. Etta was finishing her dessert when he came back to the table. His face had been reorganized. It was the face of a man who had called for backup and found that backup was also unimpressed with him. He sat down. He looked at the roses. He looked at her. "She said she likes you more now," he said. Etta looked up. Something crossed her face. Just briefly, like light moving through a room, and she nodded once. "Madame CO has always had excellent taste." "Etta. He stopped. Started again. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say right now." "Nothing," she said simply. "There's nothing to say right now, Jinwoo. That's not me being cold. That's just the truth. You had a lot to say for 6 weeks to a woman who wasn't real. You said it all." She set down her spoon. "I heard every word." The restaurant was quieter now. It was later than she'd realized. The couple to her left had paid and left at some point. The older woman by the window was gone. The waiter was doing end-of-night things quietly near the back. Etta picked up the roses. She looked at them for a moment. They really were beautiful, full and white and absurd and expensive. And then she set them back down on his side of the table. "Those were for someone else," she said. "Keep them." She picked up her bag. She left enough on the table to cover her portion and then some because she was never the kind of woman who made a point with small gestures when a large one was available. She stood up, smoothed her outfit, and looked at Seo Jinwoo one last time. He was sitting with 40 white roses and an expression she would remember for a long time. Not because it was satisfying exactly, but because it was true. It was the first completely true expression she'd seen on his face in months. He looked like a man who had just understood something important about himself and was not happy about the timing. "You were a good man for a while," Etta said. "I want you to know I remember that part too." Then she turned and walked through the restaurant and through the lobby and out into the Seoul night, which was warm and lit and moving in every direction at once, and she called Tamara before she reached the car, and when Tamara answered, Etta Brown laughed so hard she had to stop walking. Etta slept beautifully. This is worth stating plainly because it was not guaranteed. There is a version of this story where she gets home, closes the door, and the adrenaline drops and the quiet arrives, and in the quiet is everything she hadn't let herself feel in the restaurant. The 8 months, the small withdrawals, the specific loneliness of being in a relationship with someone who is slowly becoming a stranger while standing right in front of you. There is a version where she cries. Not from regret, just from the weight of it. From what it costs to hold yourself that still while something burns down around you. But that version had already happened. About 4 weeks ago, on a Sunday, in the bath, with her phone face down on the floor and Sod playing from the speaker on the shelf. She had cried then. Thoroughly. Properly. She had given the grief its full time and attention the way she gave everything her full time and attention, and when she got out of the bath she had dried off and moisturized and eaten a bowl of festival and saltfish, because she was Jamaican and her body knew what it needed, and she had sat on the edge of her bed and thought, right, now what? The fake account had gone up the next morning. So by the time she walked out of the hotel, got into the car, called Tamara, and laughed until she couldn't breathe, there was nothing left unprocessed. The grief had been filed. The anger had been converted into something useful. What remained was this. A woman who had loved someone, been treated badly, and responded with more imagination than the situation technically required, and who was now experiencing the specific lightness that comes when a chapter closes exactly the way you wrote it. She was asleep by 11:30. She slept 9 hours straight without moving. Her phone woke her at 8:47. Not an alarm. A notification. Specifically 17 notifications, arriving in a cluster the way they do when someone has been typing. In a group chat for a while and the messages finally pushed through. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling for a moment before picking it up. The group chat was called Caribbean Women in Seoul Don't Play, and it had been active since Etta and her friends Nadine and Priya had created it approximately 16 months ago after a collective incident at a gallery that they had all agreed never to describe to outsiders. It had 7 members. Etta, Nadine, Priya, two women named Kezia and Solange who were respectively Barbadian and Trinidadian, a Guyanese architect named Fern who barely spoke in the chat but reacted to everything with aggressive precision, and Eda's oldest soul friend, Jisoo, who was Korean and had been added on the grounds that she was an honorary member of any group Eda was in by default. The messages, in order, were as follows. Nadine. Okay, so I got home last night and my cousin texted me about a restaurant situation. Nadine. A restaurant situation in Seoul. Nadine involving a Jamaican woman. Nadine. And 40 roses. Nadine, Eda Brown. Nadine. Eda Brown, you pick up this phone. Priya. Wait, what happened? Nadine. I don't have full details, all I have is roses, and she was eating dinner the whole time. Kezia, what? Solange. Girl, I saw something on someone's story last night about a hotel, but I thought it was a drama clip. Fern, this was all Fern ever contributed. It was always enough. JISOO. I know exactly what happened and I'm not saying anything until Eda wakes up and tells it herself because it's her story and she deserves to be the one to tell it. JISOO, but I will say. JISOO. I've never been more proud of anyone in my life. Nadine, JISOO. Nadine. JISOO, you cannot say that and then say nothing. JISOO. I said what I said. Priya. Eda, I know you're reading this. Priya. Your read receipts are on. Priya, Eda. Eda lay there reading all 17 messages in the order they arrived. Then she put the phone face down on the duvet, stared at the ceiling, and smiled at it for a moment. Then she picked the phone back up. ETTA. Good morning. ETTA. I slept wonderfully, thank you for asking. The chat detonated. She told the whole story on a voice note. 23 minutes, which she knew was long but the situation required it. And she was not going to condense the billing section because the billing section was the best part and it deserved full time and full respect. She recorded it sitting up in bed with her tea going warm on the nightstand, speaking in the specific register she used when something was both funny and serious. Calm, detailed, occasionally pausing to let the quiet land before she moved on. She described the account creation, the photos, the 47 minutes, the calls. She described at length the consulting fee logic, which made her laugh again in the retelling the way a good joke is funny the second time if it was really a good joke the first time. She described the roses. She described his face. She described eating her meal while he stood there with the posture of a man whose entire understanding of how the world worked had just been quietly restructured around him. She did not describe him cruelly. This was noted by everyone who listened to the note, and noted again later because Eda had every right to be cruel and chose not to be, which was in its own way more devastating than cruelty would have been. She described him accurately. She said he'd been good once. She said she meant it when she said it at the table. She said that didn't change anything about what he'd done, but she also wasn't interested in making a villain out of a man who was mostly just weak and too accustomed to not having consequences. He thought the worst that could happen, she said near the end of the voice note, was that I'd find out and cry and leave. He didn't even imagine this version. And that's the thing about underestimating someone, you don't just miss who they are. You miss what they're capable of. And by the time you find out, a pause. You're standing in a hotel holding flowers for a woman who doesn't exist. She sent it. The chat was silent for 45 seconds. This was unprecedented. Then Nadine sent a voice note back that was 40 seconds long and contained, by Eda's count, 11 seconds of actual speech and the rest just screaming. Kezia sent a photo of herself lying on her kitchen floor with the caption, I have fallen and this is where I live now. Priya sent 3 paragraphs of text that were so detailed in their appreciation that Eda read them twice and felt genuinely moved. Fern sent, Crown. Jisoo sent, I'm framing the part about the consulting fee. I'm getting it printed on canvas. It's going in my living room. Solange sent, the way he called his mother. The way his mother also roasted him. Eda, they can't stop you. Nobody can stop you. You're a natural disaster in good shoes. Eda laughed and drank her tea and replied to each one individually because she was that kind of friend. Then she got up, showered, dressed, and went to work. This was the part that people always found hardest to believe when she told the story later. That the morning after the most theatrical confrontation of her adult life, she got up, put on something she loved, did her makeup with the focused efficiency of a woman who has a 9:30 meeting she will not be late for, and went to the office. Because here is what some people do not understand about women like Etta Brown. The drama was an event. Her life was not the drama. Her life was the 9:30 meeting and the portfolio review and the 2 client calls and the running of 11 people who depended on her to show up prepared and present and absolutely not derailed by her personal situation. Her life was the career she had built alone in a city that wasn't hers by birth. The professional reputation that had taken 4 years of meticulous, consistent work. The targets she had already set for the quarter and intended to meet. Jinwoo was an 8-month chapter. The book was still going. She arrived at the office at 9:14 with coffee and a folder and the expression of someone who had slept exactly the right amount, and her assistant Bora, 24 years old, deeply perceptive, a secret keeper of the First Order, looked at her when she walked in and said nothing except, "Your 9:30 pushed to 9:45, and your 10:15 is confirmed." "Perfect," Etta said. "I'll use the 15 minutes to review the hang-up numbers." Bora said, "Of course." And then, very quietly as Etta passed, "You look really good today." Etta paused, looked at Bora. Something moved between them, the specific understanding that sometimes passes between women who work in close proximity and pay attention. "Thank you, Bora," she said. "So do you." She went into her office and closed the door and sat at her desk and opened the hang-up file and worked. Jinwoo texted at 11:03. Not a long text. Not an explanation or a confession or any of the architecture of apology that she had, in other versions of this story, imagined receiving. Just couldn't sleep. She read it, set the phone face down, picked it back up 30 seconds later. She typed, "I know," then deleted it. Too much. That implied she'd been thinking about his sleep, which she hadn't. She typed, "Get some rest," then deleted that too. That was the voice of someone who still cared about his well-being as a personal responsibility, and she had resigned from that position. She put the phone down and left the text unanswered and went back to the hang-up numbers. At 12:30, her colleague Park Sung-min knocked on her office door, opened it, and said with the deeply cautious energy of a man who has heard something and is unsure how to confirm it, "Hey, are you okay? I heard something." "What did you hear?" she asked without looking up. A pause. "Something about a hotel. And roses." "I'm fine, Sungmin. You seem fine." "I am fine. You seem actually fine. Not like the kind of fine that means not fine." She looked up. "Do you want something for lunch?" "I'm ordering." He opened his mouth, closed it, said, "Galbi, please." She added it to the order. He retreated. She could hear him in the corridor saying something quiet to Bora, and Bora's reply, which was whatever Bora's reply was. She kept that girl well, and then silence. The problem, she would realize later, was that Seoul was a city but it was also a village. People knew. Not everyone. Not yet. But the specific circle in which Jinwoo operated, the money-adjacent, family-connected, always at the same restaurant circle, was not a large circle, and information moved through it the way water moves through a cupped hand. Quickly and with a lot of loss of detail but also somehow faster than anyone expected. The detail that circulated was this. Seo Jinwoo got caught. By his girlfriend. At a hotel. She was already there. He brought flowers. The detail that did not circulate, because Etta had not told it publicly and Jinwoo certainly hadn't. The billing. The fake account. The whole 3-act construction of what had actually happened. This was both because she was private about it and because she suspected Jinwoo had not shared those particular elements with anyone. For obvious reasons. What circulated was enough. She knew because Kezia texted in the afternoon with a screenshot, blurred to protect the source, of someone's private story that simply said, "That Jamaican girl with Jinwoo actually had him standing in a restaurant holding roses while she ate dinner and I'm not over it." Followed by 3 crying laughing faces and a crown emoji. She knew because Jisoo texted separately, "3 people have asked me about you today. I said nothing but I smiled and they got the message." She knew because the comments on her last public Instagram post. A photo from 2 weeks before, the 2 of them at an event which she had not yet archived, suddenly had a new energy. Not the old shade. Something different. Women who had previously been acidic in her comments saying things now like, "Okay, but she is that girl." And, "I heard what happened, respect." And, "She really sat there and ate." Etta read none of this at work. At work she worked. But at 6:15, when she was done and walking to her car and the sky was doing that particular Seoul evening thing where the light turns the buildings gold for about 12 minutes before it disappears, she sat in the driver's seat and scrolled for exactly 7 minutes. She archived the photo. Not deleted, archived. Because the memory of the good months was real, and she was not a person who rewrote history to make herself feel better. She just didn't need it on the front page anymore. Jin-woo texted again at 7:48. This time it was longer. I've been thinking about what you said, that I was a good man for a while. I don't know why that's the part one keep coming back to. I think because it's true and I don't know exactly when I stopped and that bothers me more than the rest of it. She read it twice. She didn't reply for a long time. She was home by then, in the kitchen, doing nothing in particular, just existing in her space which was hers and clean and warm and full of things she had chosen for herself. A print she'd bought at a market in her second year in Seoul. Plants that were thriving because she took care of things. A sound system that was playing something low and unhurried. She finally typed, "That's the question worth sitting with. Not me. That one." She sent it, put the phone down, poured herself something cold and stood at her kitchen window looking out at the city. She was not sad. That surprised her. Not that she'd expected to be ruined by any of this. She knew herself better than that. But she had expected a residue. Some low-grade grief, some quiet, some feeling of having lost even a thing that had gone bad. And there was something. There was the faint outline of something that used to take up more space. But mostly what she felt was this clean. Like after you reorganize a room and put everything where it belongs and stand in the doorway and look at it. Clean. And quiet. And more yourself than you were before. Her phone buzzed. Not Jin-woo. Tamara. Tell me everything is good. Etta smiled. Typed back. Everything is better than good. He texted. Twice. And nothing. I'm standing in my kitchen listening to music. A pause. Then Tamara. That's the most Etta Brown answer I've ever received and I've known you for 11 years. Etta laughed. Put the phone down. Turned up the music slightly. Outside, Seoul moved the way it always moved, with noise and light and complete indifference to any one person's story. And Etta Brown stood in her kitchen in the city she had chosen, in the life she had built, in the specific earned peace of a woman who had been underestimated by exactly the wrong person. She was fine. She was genuinely, completely, structurally fine. And somewhere across the city, Seo Jin-woo was sitting with 40 white roses and a phone and a question his mother had refused to answer for him, turning it over in the way that people sometimes finally turn things over when there is no longer anyone around to stop them from looking. The phrase came back to him at some point in the night. He didn't know where he'd heard it first. Maybe his mother. Maybe he'd read it somewhere. You only know your lover when you let her go. He sat with it. He sat with it for a long time. 3 weeks later, Etta got a promotion. Not a small one. Not the kind where they add a word to your title and give you a slightly larger budget and expect you to be grateful for the geometry of it. A real one. The kind that comes with a new office, corner, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the city that on clear days made you feel like Seoul had been arranged specifically for your benefit, and a new title and a compensation adjustment that made her sit very still in the HR director's office for approximately 4 seconds before she said, calmly, "Thank you. I'll have my response to you by end of week." She walked out of that meeting, went directly to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, and said, "Etta Brown, you are that girl." Then she washed her hands and went back to work. She told Bora first because Bora had earned it, had spent 14 months being the most reliable person in Etta's professional orbit, had fielded calls and managed schedules and protected her time with the quiet ferocity of someone who understood that her boss's success was also her own. Bora's reaction was to cover her mouth with both hands and make a sound that technically wasn't words but communicated everything. She told the group chat second. The group chat's reaction was not describable in language that exists. Nadine sent a voice note that started mid-scream. Priya sent a paragraph that was all capital letters. Kezia sent a photo of herself on her knees in what appeared to be a supermarket aisle. Solange sent, "The city of Seoul is hers. She owns it now. Legally." Fern sent the crown emoji and then, in an unprecedented move, a second emoji, the one with the fire, which represented, from Fern, something close to a standing ovation. Jisoo sent, "I'm making a reservation somewhere beautiful. Friday. All of us. Non-negotiable." Etta replied to every message. Then she went back to work, because she had a 3 o'clock and a new office to figure out how to furnish, and her life was not waiting for her to finish celebrating it. Now, the women, because that part of the story still needed resolution, and Etta, despite what she had said at the dinner table about not being interested in a war, was a thorough woman, and thorough women don't leave threads hanging. She had, over the course of the 6 weeks of her operation, done more than create one fake account and bill one unfaithful boyfriend. She had also, quietly, methodically, in the hours she would otherwise have spent being upset, mapped the situation. Who was commenting, what they knew, where the information was coming from, what the pattern of contact looked like between Jinwoo and the women who had been leaving specific details in her comments. There were 3 who mattered, not in the way that the word matter usually gets used in this context, not in the sense that they had taken anything real from her because you cannot take what was already leaving, but in the sense that they had been deliberately unkind to her in public, had used specific private information to do it, and had done so with the confidence of women who believed there would be no consequence. Etta did not believe in public confrontation. She found it inefficient and aesthetically unpleasant. But she did believe in information, and in the particular power of knowing more than the other person knows you know. What she had established, through patient research that would have impressed a private investigator and had in fact impressed Tamara, who was a solicitor and therefore professionally acquainted with the gathering of evidence. 2 of the 3 women had received gifts from Jinwoo, significant ones, one of which was a trip, which meant he had been flying someone while dating her, which was its own category of audacity, and all 3 had been in regular contact with him through a secondary number that he used for what she had come to think of as his extracurricular correspondence. She didn't expose them. That was not the move. What she did was simpler and, she felt, more elegant. She made sure she knew. She made sure that she had documentation. And she made sure, through Jisoo and through one other contact whose discretion she trusted completely, that the right person in the right adjacent circle understood that Etta Brown was not a woman who could be publicly shaded without the person doing the shading eventually discovering that she had already done her homework. Word moved the way word moves in small circles. Quietly, efficiently, without Etta saying a single public thing. The comment sections changed on their own. Jinwoo's eldest sister found out on a Thursday. Her name was Seo Min-ah and she was 37 and had the family's intelligence without its tendency toward spectacular self-sabotage. And she ran one of the Seo Group's subsidiary divisions with an efficiency that made even their mother occasionally look impressed. She and Etta had met 4 times during the relationship, twice at family dinners, once at a charity event, once at a lunch that had been organized by no one in particular and had lasted 3 hours because neither of them wanted to leave. Min-ah had liked Etta immediately. She had liked her the specific way that women who are very good at their jobs like other women who are very good at their jobs, with a recognition that goes beyond the social, something almost professional. She had said to Jinwoo, after the first dinner, with the directness their family was known for, "Don't ruin this one." He had, apparently, not taken the advice. Min-ah texted Etta on Thursday afternoon. Not about Jinwoo. She was too precise for that. She sent, "I heard about your promotion. Well deserved. If you're ever looking to expand into new sectors, I'd like to have lunch." Etta read the message and appreciated it for exactly what it was. An extended hand from a woman who had decided, independently of her brother's choices, that Etta Brown was someone worth knowing. She replied, "I'd love that. Your assistant can reach me through mine." Min-ah sent back a single thumbs up. That was that. Jinwoo found out about the promotion the way he found out about most things happening in Etta's life now, through other people, which was its own kind of consequence, and one she hadn't specifically engineered but also hadn't discouraged. Seoul's professional world was not large. He was in it. She was in it. The information existed. She found out he'd found out because Bora mentioned, very neutrally, and with the practiced discretion of someone who had decided their loyalty was clear. A Mr. Seo called the main line this morning. I told him you were in meetings. Etta looked up. Were you lying? No, Bora said. You had an 8:30 and a 10 and a 12:15. Good. Should I take messages if he calls again? Etta considered. Take a message. Don't guarantee a callback. Bora wrote this down with the focus of someone recording a policy decision. Understood. He called twice more that week. She did not call back. Not from coldness. She had said at the table that she wasn't interested in a war, and she meant it, and ignoring calls was not a war, it was a boundary, and boundaries are not aggressive, they are just true. She was not ready to talk to him as whatever they were now. Not together, not nothing, somewhere in the undefined space that follows the end of something that mattered, and so she didn't. She would when she was. She knew herself well enough to know that when existed. She was not the kind of person who closed doors by ignoring them until they disappeared. She would close it properly, eventually, on a day when she had time and the conversation had a shape she could see the end of. But that day was not this Thursday. This Thursday she had a sector meeting at 2 and she was trying a new restaurant with Nadine at 7 and she had approximately 40 things that were more pressing. Friday came and Jisoo's dinner reservation was real and excellent. It was a restaurant that Etta had walked past twice and never been to, the kind of place that is quiet about being exceptional, no neon, no queue, a small sign that would tell you nothing if you didn't already know. And Jisoo had booked a round table in the back that fit 7 and all 7 of them came, which never happened because getting 7 women with independent lives to the same table on a Friday was a small miracle that required weeks of negotiation, and Etta suspected Jisoo had been planning it since the morning she'd texted, "I've never been more proud of anyone in my life." They were all there. Nadine, who arrived first and had already ordered water and was vibrating slightly with the energy of a woman who had been waiting 3 weeks to deliver her opinions in person. Priya, who hugged Etta for a long time at the door without saying anything, which was its own language. Kezia, who walked in wearing something that made 2 people at adjacent tables glance over, and who immediately said, "Okay, I need to hear the voice, the thing you did when you said consulting fee because Jisoo said your face was completely straight." Solange, who brought a card, an actual physical card, that said on the front congratulations on your promotion and on the inside, in Solange's handwriting. And on being the most unhinged genius any of us know. In the best way. Forever. And Fern, who arrived last, sat down, looked at Etta and said, "You ate dinner." "I did," Etta said. "While he stood there." "He stood for quite a while, yes?" Fern nodded slowly. "Incredible." Then she picked up the menu, and that was the entirety of Fern's contribution to the conversation for the next 20 minutes, which was exactly right. They ate, they talked. The evening had the particular quality of time spent with people who genuinely know you, where you don't have to perform any version of yourself, where the laughter is real because the context is shared, where someone refills your glass without asking because they've been watching it and they know. Etta told the full story again, in person this time, with the faces available for reaction, and the reactions were everything. Nadine clutched the table during the consulting fee section. Priya made a noise during the roses description that Kezia had to explain to the waiter was a positive noise. Jisoo, who had heard some version of this already and had been waiting to see Etta in a room full of people who loved her to finally let herself react, laughed until she had to put her head down on the table. "The part one keep thinking about," Nadine said, when they had all recovered enough to have a conversation, "is that he called his mum." "He called his mum," Etta confirmed, "and his mum roasted him on the phone while I was finishing my dessert." Nadine put both hands flat on the table. "I want to send Madame Seo flowers. I want to send her the biggest arrangement in Seoul. I want her to know that we, as a collective, appreciate her." "She would probably like that," Etta said. "She has good taste." "The apple fell far," Kezia observed. "Very far," Solange agreed. "And rolled downhill." Etta laughed. It was the full laugh, the real one, the grandmother one, the one from the restaurant. And the table caught it and it became something shared, something that belonged to all of them, the way the best moments in good company always become collective. He was at an event 2 weeks later. Not the same event, or rather, yes, the same event, because Seoul's professional social calendar was a Venn diagram with a very small intersection and they had always overlapped in it. It was a quarterly gathering at a venue in Gangnam that her firm attended and the Seo Group's holdings meant Jinwoo occasionally appeared at, and she had known going in that there was a reasonable probability he would be there, and she had dressed accordingly. Not for him, that would have been giving him something he hadn't earned, but for herself, which was how she always dressed, which was the whole point. She saw him across the room about 40 minutes in. He saw her at the same moment. She knew because she was watching, not nervously, but with the focused attention she brought to things she wanted information about, and she saw the exact moment his eyes found her and the exact thing that crossed his face. It was not guilt. It was past guilt. It was not longing, exactly. It was past that too, or not past it but underneath it, something quieter and more structural. It was recognition. The specific recognition of a man who has lost something and is now, at a party, holding a drink, watching what the something has become without him. She was across a room being excellent. She was laughing at something someone had said. She had a glass of champagne and her posture and the specific energy of a woman who is having a good season and knows it, and there was nothing in her face when she looked back at him that was performing anything. She nodded. A small, clean acknowledgement. He nodded back. That was it. That was the whole exchange. She turned back to her conversation. He stayed where he was for a moment longer and then moved, and she didn't track where. Later in the evening she found herself near him by the circumstance of the room. A group conversation that expanded and included them both and included other people and required them to exist in the same social space without the benefit of a table and a script. It was fine. They were both professionals. They were both capable of being in the same room. He said at one point, when the conversation had moved elsewhere and they were briefly in parallel. "You look well." "I am well," she said. A pause. "I heard about the promotion. It's a good opportunity." He nodded. There was something else behind his eyes. Something he was deciding. Whether to say, weighing it, finding it either not ready or not right. What he landed on was, "You were always the best person in that building." She looked at him. He meant it. That was the thing about Jinwoo in these moments. When he was stripped of the performance of being powerful and protected and certain, he could be startlingly sincere. She had fallen in love with that version. She still recognized it. Recognition was not the same as return. "I know," she said simply, not unkindly, just accurately. Something in his face shifted. A small thing. The kind of thing no one else in the room would notice. "I know you do," he said. "That's what yeah." He didn't finish the sentence. She didn't help him finish it. She finished her champagne, excused herself gracefully from the area, and went to find Nadine, who was on the other side of the room doing something that from a distance looked like it was either networking brilliantly or about to become a story. It was networking brilliantly. Nadine was good at her life. The last thing that happened, the thing that completed the chapter in a way that chapters need completing, was not dramatic. It was small and private and occurred on a Tuesday morning approximately 6 weeks after the hotel. Etta was in her new office. Corner. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The sole view that on clear days looked arranged. She had been there early because she was always there early, and she had her coffee and a document she was reviewing and the specific quiet of an office building before most people arrive, which was her favorite kind of quiet. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Korean but unfamiliar. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "Miss Brown." The voice was composed and warm and immediately recognizable. Etta sat up slightly. "Madam Seo, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I got your number from Minna. I hope that's acceptable." "Of course," Etta said. "It's no trouble at all." A pause that was not uncomfortable. "I wanted to call for 2 reasons. The first is to congratulate you on your promotion. Minna told me. It sounds very well deserved." "Thank you. That's very kind." The second, another pause. Something in it that Etta couldn't immediately name. "I wanted to apologize. On behalf of my family. My son treated you poorly. And I know you are not looking for apologies, and I know one from his mother doesn't repair anything. But I'm 71 years old, and I've learned that the things you don't say cost you more than the things you do." Etta was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate that," she said finally. "Very much." "He is thinking," Madame Seo said. The way she said it communicated everything. Not hope, not an ask. Just information delivered by a woman who loved her son and had no illusions about him simultaneously. Perhaps for the first time in a while. "That's good," Etta said, and meant it plainly. "That's genuinely good." "Yes," Madame Seo said. "I think so too." A breath. "You are a remarkable young woman, Miss Brown. I said so to Minna and I'm saying so to you. Whatever comes next for you will be something worth watching." Etta looked out at the sole view. The buildings in the early light, the city doing its city thing, enormous and indifferent and full of everything at once. "I think so too," she said. Madame Seo laughed. It was a good laugh, dry and real and completely unbothered by its own existence. The laugh of a woman who had earned the right to be amused. They said goodbye warmly. Etta put the phone down on her desk and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at the window, at the city. at the view that on clear days made you feel like Seoul had been arranged for your benefit. Today was a clear day. She picked up her coffee. She opened the document. She went back to work. Somewhere across the city, Seo Jinwoo was waking up in the apartment that used to feel full, and now felt like a question he didn't know how to answer. He would have a day. He would have many days. He would carry the phrase, "You only know your lover when you let her go," the way you carry something that is too heavy to set down and too true to resent. He would be better eventually, maybe, or he wouldn't. That was his work now, not hers. Hers was the corner office. The new title. The 7 women around a table on a Friday night laughing until someone had to put their head down. The phone call from a woman she respected. The city in the morning light. Hers was the season golden, unguarded, entirely her own. Etta Brown had loved someone and been taken for granted and responded with more creativity and self-possession than the situation technically required. She had billed him. She had eaten the dinner. She had laughed the loudest. And now she was here, in her window, in her city, in her life, and she was winning in the quiet, undeniable way of people who never needed anyone to watch. Though plenty of people were watching. Seo Jinwoo most of all.
Hey besties, in this story we learned that many people waste years chasing validation from those who do not value them. This story reminds us that self-respect is more powerful than revenge. When someone takes you for granted, choose growth over bitterness. The greatest victory is building a life so fulfilling that their regret no longer defines your happiness. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe and share.